Hi there. My name is Devry Boughner Vorwerk, founder and CEO of DevryBV Sustainable Strategies, which is a company whose purpose is to inspire business to courageously serve humanity. And simplified, we work with companies by putting ESG at the center of the business strategy and working with them on their journey. I am delighted to be here with the Chief Sustainability Officer, Francis Hyatt of Liberty Mutual. I think we're going to have a great conversation, Francis, based on the fact that we sort of work in the same space. We spend our days working on the E and the S and the G. And you will be sharing with us and all those who are tuning in the journey that not only you have gone on personally as a Chief Sustainability Officer, but where Liberty Mutual is as it relates to your role as a company in not only driving changes for your own company, but the critical role that the insurance industry is playing in driving broader changes for the clients that you work with. I thought, Francis, most important, before we dive into this alphabet soup of an E, S, and G, can we start by you briefly describing Liberty Mutual's business? Let's not assume that folks know everything, all the great things that business does.
Happy to, Devry. So Liberty is a global property and casualty insurer. Our businesses are broken into three discrete segments. The first is our retail business, which we call Global Retail Markets, and that provides products and services similar to homeowners and auto insurance, renters insurance, et cetera. And then we have Global Risk Solutions, which is our commercial business, and that comprises products that you could think of commercial fleet for automobile, for customers that have fleets of vehicles, transportation, construction. Certainly, we have international segment of that business that has more specialty lines. We like to say that we insure everything from skateboards all the way to satellites at Liberty Mutual. And then the third business is our investments business. So we have a Liberty Mutual Investments, which manages the portfolio of almost $100 billion worth of assets on behalf of the organization and our policyholders. And so those three entities make up Liberty Mutual Insurance Group.
Great. I really appreciate that because it's important then to understand Liberty Mutual's role. And Francis, I forgot to wish you a happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. It's 2 years, I understand, in your role. But for the folks listening, do not underestimate the 2 years. Francis has been with Liberty Mutual for 30. And so you have a very clear understanding, and you've been through this evolution and this process of where sustainability and ESG fits in to the business portfolio. There's been a lot of talk about the role of the insurance industry as it relates to ESG. So let's have that conversation. What do you see? What does Liberty Mutual see as the role of the insurance industry? And frankly, what does that mean for Liberty Mutual?
Sure, Devry, that's a great question. So, sometimes when people think of insurance, they don't necessarily automatically think of sustainability. But if we just focus, for example, on climate has forever been an issue that insurance companies are dealing with. And so for Liberty Mutual, we really have a front row seat when we think about the issues that our policyholders or that the organization experiences when it comes to either climate related weather disasters, et cetera. But for us, we take our role very seriously of delivering, security for our policyholders, right? So we want to be there for our customers if they experience peril or loss. We also, when we think about ESG from an insurance perspective, it's also part of the value stream or the value chain. So when you think about our suppliers or when we talk to our customers on the commercial side, we want to ensure they are embracing an ESG mindset, that they're thinking about the critical factors of environmental, social, and governance and how those impact their business. And then maybe lastly, I would say that if you think about the benefit that ESG brings for Liberty Mutual, by having an enterprise view of this, it gives us an opportunity to drive greater consistency across the organization, which is critical for us, critical for our investors, critical for our policyholders. So it's kind of a win-win for all of us to be looking at it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to unpack two different streams of thought here. Let's start with the first one.
Sure.
First of all, for those listening, spend some time on Liberty Mutual's site. I believe this is best practice as it relates to the reporting and the transparency. And also, you just mentioned enterprise view. And I want to simplify that a bit, because I have seen, and actually I've got it here. I would encourage folks to take a look. The organizational structure that you have worked to set up. I know it's not just you. You have a highly qualified team working with you. But can you walk us through what it means to take an enterprise approach to ESG? Sure. And the benefits of doing that from an effectiveness standpoint on ESG, but also from sort of a governance standpoint?
Absolutely, Devry. Those are great questions. So let me start by saying that I'm very fortunate to work for a company that has actually put resources into allowing me to build a sustainability organization. Because in order to do what we need to do, to drive the agenda from an environmental, social, or governance perspective, one, we have to be aligned with the business. It's a business issue. This is not a corporate issue. Sustainability is about what we do for our customers, and therefore we have to be front-facing on this from a business perspective. So as I was building out my team, and I'll just be real quick on this, I needed to ensure I had very technical, capable people that would understand what the business needs were going to be. Yeah. And from an underwriting perspective, for example, so you said, what is consistency in driving an enterprise approach mean for an insurance company? It means for an underwriting group, how do they build ESG factors into the underwriting process? How do they create a sustainability mindset in all of our underwriters and all of our service people, so that as we're engaging with our customers regarding products and services or claims or risk consulting, that we're thinking through that lens of what does this mean for our policyholders when it comes to environmental, social, or governance. From an investing perspective, as you can imagine, lots in the news about sustainable investing. Well, we've been on that journey well before I got into that role. Our company has been focusing on shifting the portfolio to be more sustainable, to be more focused on renewable forms of energy for well over a decade. But for us, it's about that same mindset of what are the ESG factors that are important for our investors, internal investors, to be looking at as they're looking at different sectors or investment opportunities. And then in the retail space, clearly the retail product, as you know, tends to be a little bit more of a price game, right? People shop their homeowners or their auto insurance. But for us, it's about how are we embracing digitization? How are we decreasing our carbon footprint as an organization? What are we doing for green products and services? How are we evaluating opportunity for our policyholders who experience a loss and maybe asking for us to be talking to them about more green replacement options, et cetera. It's about enabling greater technology when losses happen. So in the old days, the claims adjuster would go out. How do we help them think differently about using digital, using satellite, using drone technology, et cetera? So my team really focuses on this mindset issue across the organization. And candidly, the organization loves it. They embrace it. It's really fun.
I love the words using mindset. At our company, we work with clients on taking an integrated approach, the integrated sustainability framework. And where we meet our clients is with the possibility mindset. It's possible. So I really appreciate the effort and the work that you've done internally. I want to take a step back now and talk about sort of what's happening in your space, but in all of our space. You meet your customers where they are. You often are on the front lines when a climate crisis or a climate event happens in a local community, or it's impacting also one of your corporate customers who's getting perhaps external stakeholder pressure to become more sustainable. Can you walk me through sort of at a very local or customer level, how you're engaging with your clients, those that are buying skateboard insurance, as you said, or those that are working to address satellites, et cetera?
Sure. That's a great question. Devry, I have some good examples to talk about. I think it's really important. So let's start in the commercial space or the specialty space, and let's talk about, for example, our commercial construction customers that are building some of the largest buildings that we see around the world. Well, climate-related issues are impacting in the construction industry pretty seriously. And so as our customers are boots on the ground with, you know, thousands and thousands of employees trying to build these buildings, we're trying to help them understand the place, for example, that resiliency and building more resilient structures has in their process, right? And they're hungry for it. They're bringing the questions to us. So that requires that we have good risk consulting services for them, that we have good thought leadership from them, or for them, excuse me, around what is building greater resiliency into a commercial construction project look like. Another question that we get, it has to do with, you know, really the transition from traditional fossil fuel fleets to hybrid fleets and the future of electric vehicles. Well, we want to ensure that we have good products and services for our policyholders every step of the way. Now, certainly there are factors outside of our control. Think about things like the infrastructure needed to support an electric vehicle fleet, or we think about the issues around, you know, battery storage, et cetera. But from a products and services perspective, we want to be ready with our policyholders as these issues are coming up. On the retail side, and we talked a little bit about some of this, but as we look at climate scenario analysis and we look at the data around where are weather events predicted to happen, what are the weather events that are predicted to happen, we want to be able to consult with our customers on the retail side, as you said, those that are purchasing homeowners or auto insurance, to help them understand, oh, you might be in a region that we believe is now more prone to expect hail events, for example, or potentially flood, or, you know, potentially issues associated with wildfire. And we want to be proactive with them in terms of engaging in the dialogue. What does that mean in terms of roof structure? What does that mean in terms of shuttering? What can you do to prepare and prep to protect from flooding, et cetera? So there, we do take pretty much everything we do from a customer mindset perspective. What are the needs of the customers when it comes to their own ESG journeys, and how are we showing up with them, Devry?
Well, Francis, what I appreciate is I live here in Minnesota and we had hail last year and every roof in our neighborhood has been replaced.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
I want to underscore for folks listening that, you know, this isn't just global COP26, and I want to talk about that in a second. It's also, how do we translate that at the very basic level in terms of options that homeowners or others have to mitigate these risks? And that's where I really see Liberty Mutual through a lot of what I've been researching. That's where I see you meeting your clients or the customers where they are. Can we talk just a minute about COP26?
Sure.
And really, for those who don't follow the COP26, it's essentially the Global Climate Summit that took place just a while back. How do you feel about some of the outcomes? And in particular, you've mentioned sort of this traditional energy sources. Do you have a thought on the outcomes there? And what does that mean for Liberty Mutual?
Sure, absolutely. So maybe at the macro level, to start with COP26, this is going to require the climate crisis, and, you know, embracing a decarbonized future is going to require a lot of collaboration across sectors, across industry, and candidly across countries. So for me, I found that message to be really hopeful, Devry, because I think we needed that reminder that, look, we're all in this together, and we can't, you know, united we stand in terms of being able to do this. I do think that I think one of the other key messages that came out of COP that I think is critical is this idea that the transition that we need to make away from fossil fuels needs to be a responsible transition. It's not a switch that is going to turn. And, you know, this climate crisis is serious, Devry. We all, not one of us, I think, would disagree with the fact that we have an existential problem that we're facing.
Yeah.
You know, at Liberty, we like to use the term both and. It's both an existential crisis, and we have a need to manage energy needs around the world in a responsible and thoughtful way. And what I appreciated about the outcomes of COP is that we didn't get the switch needs to turn tomorrow. We got the, look, this needs to be carefully and thoughtfully planned, especially when we think about areas of the world like China or India that are much more dependent on more traditional forms of fossil fuel. And so the glide path that needs to be put in place cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution. I do think the U.S. Is stepping up in ways that we need to in terms of our own commitments from a decarbonization perspective. But I really felt like that the important messages out of COP were responsible transition. We're in this together.
Yeah.
We need a decarbonized future, and we need concrete commitments from countries and businesses to decarbonize their future.
Yeah, I appreciate your take on that, Francis, because there's been some skepticism and folks are saying, well, did it go far enough? And it requires all of us to be responsible and actually take a look at what that energy transition looks like. I mean, when we start to see that, 40% of the world is still using coal, it's 40% of, the energy source. It allows us to think through carefully how we go. And, the insurance companies are at the center of that, because it's your specialty to think about how you're going to manage risk and mitigate risk, but also create opportunity in that. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts, Francis, as our time comes closer to an end, around some of the trends that you're seeing in 2022. I also like to use the word, are you seeing any structural shifts, some actual structural changes in 2022 that will lead us, toward this ESG, I don't know, evolution, but I'd say revolution.
Sure, I think that's a great way for us to start to close out, Devry. So it was great that you just talked about COP26, because I think to start in terms of looking at those trends, I think all businesses, all countries around the world are really aligned in looking forward to this continued emphasis on mitigating the impacts of the climate disaster that we're facing. And those mitigation strategies fall into a whole host of different buckets. Some of them are related to renewable forms of energy. Some of them are related to pulling back on fossil fuels. Some of them are related to decarbonization technology. How do we actually pull carbon out of the atmosphere or pull it out of, more dirty forms of production? I think the other trend that we're going to see is that from a product and service delivery perspective, innovation in this space is going to be key. We are not going to be able to achieve the goals that we have for a decarbonized future by thinking the same way that we did. So embracing an innovative mindset, both from a technology perspective, also products and services, is going to be critical. I think the third one that I would share with you, and then maybe we can chat back and forth, is that vulnerable communities are experiencing the impacts of climate change, in some cases at a stronger rate than traditional communities. And so if we think about the issues around protection gap, how do we ensure that those vulnerable communities actually have the coverage that they need from a climate weather perspective? What kinds of products and services might be put in place? So for example, there are products like parametric insurance that can be scaled for vulnerable communities that are less expensive, easier to understand, trigger-based. They pay based on different conditions that get set. And so I think those would be some of them. I think maybe the last one that I would say is that private and public partnerships need to continue at a very strong rate. If we don't have public-private partnership in order to be able to address the issues from a regulatory perspective, investing in greater infrastructure to be able to support things like EV, ensuring that we have commitments to be able to produce the renewable energy that we need to meet the decarbonized future, I don't know that we're ever going to get there, Devry.
Well, I appreciate your outlook. I'm going to approach it as an optimist, like I said, with the possibility mindset. I do, before we close, it's really important to underscore that we talk about the E, S, and the G, and you and I have talked a lot about the E here, the S being social and governance. And a lot of people say the S stands for squishy, meaning we don't really understand what the S is. As we're closing out and giving any kind of final thoughts for the viewers, could you sort of lift that up and elevate the conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So I love the fact that you brought up that term and concept of squishiness, because we don't think it's squishy at Liberty Mutual. We think the S is concrete and very real. And it starts with understanding where your employees fit in your value stream. And so for us, our employees are so front facing with our customers. Our product is a contract. It's a promise to protect you at a future date, but that promise is only fueled by our talent. So the first component of the S that I would bring up, Devry, is we really need to look at our workforces, ensure that we're treating them fairly, ensure that we have really good equitable access to benefits, that we've got the right types of development opportunities for folks, that we're growing a workforce and teaching people. You said, I think, a possibility mindset. At Liberty Mutual, we teach people to embrace a growth mindset, which is very similar, right? Don't be constrained by what you think you can do. Think about what the possibilities are that we can bring forward in order to service our policyholders. So we really feed that talent engine at Liberty. I think the second piece that I'll highlight is living diversity, equity, and inclusion has to be real. It cannot be a marketing stick. We have to have systems and processes in place in our organizations to ensure that we're giving life to all the different cohorts of difference, whether it's race or gender or LGBTQIA, or candidly, difference of thought or disability. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
And we need to embrace that level of difference because our customers expect us to do that. The board expects us to do that. And this is part of who we are, and we need to live that value very, very strongly.
Well, Francis, you and I could talk for a long time, and I hope we do, and we continue the conversation. I appreciate the time that you've taken. Congratulations on your leadership, your purpose as a company to help people embrace, you've used that word a lot, embrace today and confidently pursue tomorrow. I encourage those viewing to go take a look at some of the written work that's out there, and see what Liberty Mutual is up to. In our company, we use a term, courageous leadership. We certainly see that, and the insurance industry does have a role to play. And so we appreciate you taking time and demonstrating the leadership that Liberty Mutual is taking on the ESG pathway.
Thank you, Devry. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken with us, and I'll look forward to connecting again soon. Take good care.
Excellent. Okay, for all of our viewers, be well, take care, and thank you again for tuning in.